Next up, we'll be hearing from industry experts and voices in the small business community for a conversation on Hispanic small business ownership trends and the pursuit of the American dream. I'm pleased to welcome on stage Alan Gutierrez, Associate Administrator in the Office of Entrepreneurial Development at the Small Business Administration, Ana Bermudez, the founder and CEO of Tagit, a mobile app that allows TV viewers to buy items from their favorite TV shows, Tara Palacios, the director of BizLaunch, Arlington, Virginia's small business and entrepreneurial assistance network, which hosts over 40 workshops a year aimed at helping local small business owners plan, develop, and grow their business. And Barbara Bird, professor emerita in the Kogod School of Business at American University. The Hill Latinos staff writer, Rafael Bernal, will be leading this conversation. Rafael, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Diana, and welcome all. And as she said, we're going to jump straight into the questions. It's almost like, you almost don't have to say it, that Latino entrepreneurship is growing faster than small business and other demographics. But there's still barriers, and there's still specific barriers to Latinos. So let's get into that, like, to each of you. What are these barriers, and how do you eliminate them? Let's start way on the other side with Alan.
Sure. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here and for all of you being here. Certainly it's a very exciting time, as Mark had mentioned, and congratulations for all you're doing and your leadership over there. It's so exciting, and look forward to working closely together on the real, importance of how we're moving forward. But going back to, the challenges, certainly one of the things we see at SBA, at Small Business Administration, is that it's not only a Latino thing, it's not only a Hispanic thing, it's across the board in terms of access to capital in that aspect, right? So one of the things that we're doing from the leadership of Administrator McMahon and myself and other leaders in the agency is really engaging and really facilitating our district offices, which are 68 strong across the country, to really engage more and working more closely together with the lending community. And what I would say on that is that making it more accessible, we just launched a couple months ago a portal called Lending Match, where it facilitates the individual to be able to put his or her information, and will give them instantly information of what route to take from that perspective. So we've also engaged and really put more emphasis on our district offices throughout to an increase more of loans and more opportunity for individuals from that standpoint. So that's what we're doing in terms of, how do we create that? Because we recognize that, capital is the engine, the fuel that is part of the engine. So that's what we're looking at from SBA.
Now, Ana, I know your capital is one of your core issues,
Yes.
As we've talked about. What do you see as the main challenges for Latinos in access to capital?
Well, I think the very interesting thing is that as Latinos, we forget that we are part of the 1%. Unfortunately, the 1% that we are a part of is the lower 1%. So when I'm looking at Latinas specifically, or the Latinx community, or whatever our community is, we are looking at representing less than 1% of Latinas are actually receiving contracts for procurement in Fortune 500 companies. I'm not sure how low the statistic is for Latinas actually obtaining capital from VCs, but it seems to be a theme of less than 1% across all opportunities within business. So having that business outlook and understanding that capital and opportunity are very important for the success of any business. When you're working in the tech industry, where women as a whole are not represented as well, the obstacles are just that much greater. So yes, capital is one of them. Opportunity with contracts is another, and then lack of representation.
Right, and Tara, sort of at the hyper-local level, what does that look like? What does that look like in Arlington?
Yes, so one of the things that we've done for the last, I would say, close to 15 years is we have a BizLaunch en Español program. And with that program, we work very closely with entrepreneurs from the very beginning, as soon as they have an idea of what they want to do. And then we go in and let them know from a logistics standpoint where the opportunities are, where the trends are, where the risks are. How do you access capital? Who's lending? Working very closely with our partners in the SBA and making sure, because what we found, whether it's Latino entrepreneurs, entrepreneurs from all over the world, if you have access to information to understand what you're dealing with, you minimize the risk, and the opportunity is so much better for you because you're going out there with the information that you need. We say it's a success even if you don't start a business because you haven't invested thousands of dollars into something that's not going to work. And with our Biz Launch in Espanol program, because we're focusing with and on Latino entrepreneurs, we've hit over 15,000 people have come through our doors. And when we were able to touch them with this information, the likelihood of them going on to succeed is that much higher. So from a local perspective, we're extremely supportive of the businesses that are here in our community by providing them with what they need to succeed.
Now, Barbara, in your research, is that information getting down to the small business owners, or is there a split in who's getting good information to get to either grow or start a new business?
Well, my research first attempted to take a representative sample of the Latinos in the Washington, D.C. area, which is blessed with 7 subpopulations of Latinos from Central America, South America, and Mexico. Because we thought maybe countries of origin might make a difference. But we didn't get a sample that was truly representative because it's hard to find Latino entrepreneurs in the Washington, D.C. area or anywhere else. So the sample that we got, one of the things that we found was that it was overrepresented with South Americans as opposed to Central Americans, underrepresented with countries like Salvador, Guatemala, and Nicaragua, because it was obtained through the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, which is more high potential. People are high potential. They're more likely to have gone to Biz Launch. They're already high potential candidates. So I think that there's a split between the unknown 1% in this community, which are the single operator business that's operating out of a home. The other thing we found was that something like 30% of even these high potential entrepreneurs had a business plan. So one of the things that goes into being able to get a loan or to find funding through angels and other sources is having a written document. It doesn't have to be a formal business plan, but something that actually puts your business model into words that can be shared with other people. And I think that's one of the things that we can contribute as educators and service providers to the Latinos in our community.
Let's look at this from the perspective of personal experience. Anna, you started a business, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you started first with self-funded,
yes.
And now you're helping get capital to other people. How do you contrast those two experiences?
Well, I really do think they're related. I came from the finance industry understanding that capital is essential for business. Without capital, there is no business. So I understood very early on that accessing capital was important. Understanding what interest rate you were possibly borrowing money at was also important. But because I had a very successful career in finance, I was able to create a savings account. I was able to fund a retirement account. So when the opportunity came for me to start a business in tech, I said, well, I'd much rather not pay interest and do what many of these other successful entrepreneurs have already done and put my money to work first. Because then investors are more confident in you. Okay, well, if you're willing to risk your own capital, perhaps I could risk some of mine. So understanding the capital component was very important for me. But on the other side is once you obtain that capital or once you run out of your own funds, after the anxiety goes away, you start thinking, okay, well, what's next? How am I going to obtain more capital now to move forward? And the biggest, I guess, characteristic that one must have, other than picking yourself up after every no, is understanding that tomorrow is another day. And just because one person couldn't relate to your business idea or to what you're working on doesn't mean that the person you're meeting with tomorrow will not. So persistence is definitely key but understanding how capital works is just as important.
Right. So now, Alan, this is your second tour of duty at the SBA.
Yes, yes.
And sandwiched in between the two, you helped lead the Latino Coalition and the Chamber of Commerce, the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. Sort of contrasting what you saw from the private side of things and what you see from the public side of things. What do you think makes Latino business owners different in general? Or can you even generalize like that?
I think, that embedded, spirit of entrepreneurship is, I think you equate it from whatever country, from Latin America, when we go visit or go visit our families or aunts or uncles or grandparents, everyone has a business to a certain degree, it seems like, and I was born in Costa Rica, and everyone has a small, they call it their pulperias, and in other places they call it different, but everyone has their entrepreneurship spirit in that aspect. And I think that, as you come to America and to the United States and come for the American dream, then you have additional resources available to be able to take that another step. As you mentioned, capital is an important part of the overall piece, but from SBA's perspective too, under my office, we have 1,000 locations across the country that are, I call the 3 lanes. I call them, we have the small business development centers we have, which you used to your advantage as well. And congratulations on that. So I'm glad you did that. And that's what we want more people to do, is we have the resources available to help you in terms of putting together a business plan. Or if you want additional capital, what are the right steps in that sense? So the small business development centers, the SCORE network in terms of retired individuals that can give you a mentorship. And then also the women business centers. We talked about Latino Entrepreneurship and the fastest growing. Certainly we have over 100 women business centers across the country. We just expanded another 10, I'm happy to say that, in the last month. So we really want to engage and continue to spread that footprint to be able to have those access points, not only for Latino entrepreneurs, but all entrepreneurs across the country.
So we're basically talking about there's certain rules and regulations that maybe for immigrants such as ourselves, you can say maybe they weren't present and they facilitate the creation of business. But Congressman Espaillat earlier was also talking about how it's sometimes hard for small business owners to follow these rules or to even know what the rules are. So Tara, at a local level, what federal and state regulations or programs are working and which ones aren't working?
So I would say looking at local and being able to navigate is confusing for most people. So if you haven't been born or raised in this country, it's difficult. And then if you add a language barrier, it's even more difficult. And so what we try to do, and in hearing from the congressman earlier, we hear a lot about leasing, challenges with people that are getting into kind of legal arrangements and not knowing what they can do from a legal perspective. And that's why earlier when I was saying the more you could come to us as early as possible, whether it's mentorship through SCORE, whether it's the SBDC, whether it's economic development, come to us and learn what those local rules are, because sometimes we'll get people on the back end and they've invested and saved their money, and then they find themselves in a quagmire. And it's harder to negotiate out of that or navigate out of an issue once you're in it than if it's an idea and we can say, you can do this use in this space, or this strategic plan, you might want to tweak it based on a certain tax or regulation. And I also encourage a lot of businesses to really follow what's going on the Hill, because a lot of the federal regulations, and this is what we see in economic development, it may not impact you right now, right? You're going along, you're doing your business. But this trade war with China is going to hit you. So what you need to do is to follow what's going on. Go to your congresspeople. Let them know, hey, look, I'm manufacturing in China right now. There's a trade war. How is this going to impact my business? Because I'm telling you, 6 months from now, we're going to feel it. And as a business owner, it's your responsibility to understand how this policy is going to impact you. And we advocate and do a lot of that. And I just encourage everyone to know that on the federal side, on the state side, on the local side, understand as an entrepreneur how that affects you, because this is going to hurt your bottom line and hurt your ability to grow.
But do you see that reflected in your research, that, federal and state policies and programs sort of affecting the way that Latinos do business, or is small business somewhat shielded, or does it feel shielded?
My research didn't really look at that, so I really can't contribute very much to that. We were mostly interested in getting more information on Latino entrepreneurs. I think that basically it's an under-researched population of business. And most of the studies have been done on Mexican business owners, mostly in California, but in some in the Southwest. There's been a study of Latinos in Chicago, but we felt that there's a number of new gateway cities that Latinos have migrated to, Washington, D.C. being one of the richest in diversity, that we really need to get more information about what, not only the issues that entrepreneurs face, but what they bring with them in human and social capital, and how they utilize their human and social capital as well as their financial capital to start a business and then eventually grow the business and then have that business survive. So I don't think I didn't study the laws or regulations, but trying to get access to the population of Latino entrepreneurs.
We know that there's a lot of millennials, nearly 40% of Latino businesses are started by millennials. Is that a cause for optimism? And I'll leave this question open to including you, Barbara, whoever wants to answer it.
Yeah, I was going to go back to the trade comment there. In terms of it, I think, international trade is important, right? There's 30% of small businesses that do that. But if you look at it from a macro perspective, the tax reform has, really affected in a very positive nature small business community. Our administrator, she's been on an Ignite tour visiting across the country and sitting down with small business owners across the country and getting that one-on-one perspective, really, local perspective. And overwhelmingly, they have seen that the tax reform is benefiting them, benefiting in terms of opportunity for investment, opportunity to hire more individuals. A friend of mine who owns a microbrewery down in Florida, he was able to buy, more machinery and then in that respect, hire 2 additional individuals. If you look at that from a perspective, so there's more enthusiasm, they're more positive in terms of overall in the small business community, all that. And the millennials, that's an important part too. It's something that we're looking at as well too, is how to SBA in terms of making it more 21st century, right? Not only from the feel and look and how you guide through our website, but what are the things that we need to look at to be more out there and more innovative in that aspect, from digitalization, from access, and more partnerships too, I think is important as well.
Well, I think...
Go ahead, please. Briefly before we take some questions from the audience.
Absolutely. The exciting part about the millennial generation being more into entrepreneurship, I think is very, very exciting, because it sets a tone and a pace for the even younger generations. And from experience, and my world is very limited to my big family, which sometimes seems like it is the world, but through that experience, I was able to see that the older generations weren't as easily taking that risk. They weren't thinking, let's take that risk, let's cut off our income and see where this goes. So seeing an uptrend is certainly exciting, and for me especially, because the more members of our community that are entrepreneurs, the easier it'll be for us that are already entrepreneurs and the people that are thinking about entering entrepreneurship.
My study found that, again, these were high potential Latinos that came through the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. A good third of them were self-employed. So I get this also from this entrepreneurial student body at American University, that many of them are not interested in hiring anybody. They want to have what's called an income substitution, as opposed to a business that's going to hire other people. So there is a self-employed population, and a good third of these people didn't employ anybody but themselves. And then of those that employed people, most of them had fewer than 3 employees. So these are not businesses that were hiring a lot of people, except in the construction industry. That was big. The biggest businesses were in that area. So I think the millennials are interested in working for themselves, not necessarily having to deal with the legal issues of hiring other people and all the complications of that process. So.
Let's see if we have any questions from our audience. We have one right here. Maybe we need a microphone.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to ask a question. I'm Dr. Minerva Diaz with Diaz Consulting Society, and here's my question. I came up with this business idea, and it's a diplomatic engagement business, or services oriented. My problem is monetizing the concept. So for services, for my kind of business, what can I do, or what can those people who are engaged in this type of business do to monetize, to bring in the clients while we compete with the rest of other similar businesses?
Who wants to take that one?
I have a very specific example. I had this idea to create this app where you could easily purchase items that you're seeing on TV as you're watching your favorite TV show. And although it was a great idea and I was excited that I could shop more whenever I wanted to, I didn't necessarily know how I was going to monetize it. So creating an app, although it seemed innovative 6-7 years ago, the challenge would have been how will this app be differentiated from the millions of others that have already been created. So my advice to you is definitely speak to mentors in and out of the industry that you are working in or that you're planning on beginning a business in, because they will challenge you to think bigger. They will tear apart your business plan, they will tear apart your idea, and in the process, which is what happened with me, one of my mentors was being very critical of my business idea. He challenged me to think even bigger. And it was in that challenge and in that discussion that we were able to come up with a very lucrative monetization plan. Exactly.
Tara, I feel you had
Yes. I concur with Anna. Definitely engage a mentor, especially when it comes with pricing. Sometimes what I find, especially with women entrepreneurs, is that we look at lowering our prices or not having the correct price where you can make money. And one of the things is know your value, know your worth, know what you're doing, and ask for it. And you keep going until somebody says yes, and it just evolves from there. And there are some in the DC metro area, and I know around the country, there's some amazing people that would love to be able to help you with your endeavor. We're open. We work with people whether you're from Arlington or not. I think that's what makes us different, because what we found is as our businesses grow and they do well, our community does well. So your community is also invested in supporting local and making sure. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs many times feel that they're this individual and I must fight this on my own, you know, and you're there and you're trying to figure it all out. No, reach out, ask for help, and you'll be surprised at all the yeses that you get as your business grows.
I believe we might have time for some more questions. We have a lot of them. I saw, hey, this gentleman back here raised his hand first.
Hello, good morning. Thank you so much for speaking with us. My name is Carlo Aragon, and I'm from New Mexico. But I started a business in the Sultanate of Oman, and I had a question about tandas, lending credit. So in the Sultanate, it's completely normalized to ask for credit or for funds from people in your community and put in a big pocket of money and to help fund your business. But what do you think about the normalization of sort of tandas here in the United States? I don't know if you've heard about this as well. It's popular in Latino communities, but a lot of it's a community-based funding. What do you think about the normalization of this in order to get funds?
You said tandas?
That's when money is put together.
Bundled together?
I would, with everything from entrepreneurship, investigate it and see who all is part of this group and what is the likelihood to get a return on investment. I think that in 2018, creative funding and financing is the way to go. most people are more challenged to get traditional lending because of the qualifications and all the things that you need to have, even with investment. And so some of these creative ways, and we're seeing more people doing funding that way, friends, family, different types of co-ops that are coming together to bring in more people, so the likelihood of you being able to succeed is that much higher. So I'm for it, but I caution in that you want to do as much investigation and to see who has been funded in the past, so that the likelihood of you getting that return on investment is much higher.
Yeah, and just to add on that, I was thinking about it from a traditional perspective, right? If you're looking for capital and so forth, we talked about it earlier, was also through our offices and through our lending institutions, microloans as well. So think about that from that perspective, because that, for right now, so far in the fiscal year, 17%, close to $5 million have been already allocated in the Latino community in terms of microloans. Yeah. And that's a loan up to $50,000. There's other parts too, the other loans that are available as well, but if you want to, on the traditional side, because remember, one of the things that we do with the lending community is that we back up a certain percentage, so it's a guaranteed loan. So that is always, if you're having a hard time or a challenge getting a traditional loan, that's where SBA and us working with the lending community gives you that opportunity from that risk factor that a lot of times as an entrepreneur, the banks or the lending institution, do a little bit more scrutiny on us in that aspect.
Yes. We have a couple more probably. Right here.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Oh, it's loud. Okay, so my question is about, I guess, kind of schooling. I'm turning 20 this year, but I mean, what is your opinion on, if I want to start my own business, I mean, do I really need to go to school? Do I really need to have a background in some kind of field to begin, because, I mean, I really want to go to school, but I mean, if I have to get into debt and all of that, is it really worth it in the end?
Tie that into the point you made, Barbara, earlier about maybe it's a change in the labor market. We're doing things differently.
Well, I'm a retired professor. Okay, so I've already made my income from the university, and so I'll go to what I said when I began my career. I used to tell my students, if you want to come to school, wait until you've started and you have problems, and then come to me. But right now, the education has advanced a bit, and it is now much more dynamic and hands-on. And I would suggest that anybody that wants to start a business read the book called Lean Startup. Mm-hmm. It's a way of working through the pivoting of your business concept. And then once again, the reason to go to school, maybe not to learn about entrepreneurship, but to meet your fellow classmates, your future partners, your future investors. That's the value of going to a classroom with real people to get connected.
I think you wanted to add a point to that?
I'm just very passionate about education within our community. It's an issue that I always say, the more you know, the better. I could not be a business owner today. I certainly could not be an entrepreneur in tech if I did not go to college and receive my degree. It helped me. I studied finance. It helps me understand capital markets. It helps me understand interest rates and the cost of doing business. But more importantly, it taught me discipline. Being an entrepreneur means constantly learning, teaching yourself new things, because there is no one point in time where you know it all and are 100% prepared. So you have to be open-minded to constantly learning and putting yourself in situations where, yes, you will incur debt. Yes, you will have to learn things that you have never even heard of. But that's the beauty of entrepreneurship. That's what helps you grow. And had I not gone to college, had I not invested in my education, I would not be here today.
I think it's healthy to end this on a hurrah for education and entrepreneurship. We can all agree on that. So thank you all for being here.
Thank you all.